Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Councillor James Cole. I'd like to welcome you all to this morning's licensing subcommittee meeting. I will explain how the meeting will be conducted in a moment, but before I do that, could I please ask the clerk to provide us all with some guidance on how to participate in this meeting? Stephen?
Yes, indeed. Yes, I'm just going to give some outline some reminders to how we conduct meetings via Zoom. I'll also share a screen which explains in a bit more, gives some pointers as well. If you bear with me just a moment. Sorry, I'm nearly there. I do apologise. Yeah. I'm sharing the screen now, and I'm going to read out the reminders as well alongside that. The meeting is being webcast and recorded. Please can all attendees make note of your meeting ID. As if you experience any technical difficulties and need to join by telephone only. Please ensure you have clicked participants at the bottom of your screen so you can see the list of the attendees on the right hand side. The chairman will be checking at various points during the meeting that you've been able to hear all of the proceedings. We would ask that you do this by clicking the raise hand link under the participants tab or on the telephone if you have to join in that way. We cannot proceed the meeting until we are sure participants can be heard when permitted to speak and can hear. If at any point you're not able to hear, please can I ask you to let us know using the chat function or raising your Zoom hand. If we become aware that is a problem, we will have to return to a point in the meeting or possibly, if necessary, adjourn. There's also the option to join via, as I said, there's the option to join via telephone if that becomes the best way through. All apart from myself and the chairman are currently muted. Please remember to unmute yourself when you're asked to speak by the chairman and then remute when you're finished speaking. You will be advised to unmute yourself if you've started to speak and forgotten to do so. Before starting your presentation, could I please ask you to state your name and pause for a moment. This will help participants who are joining the meeting via audio only and will also give us a chance to ensure that we can hear you clearly. After the introduction, the chairman will ask whether all participants have been able to hear before asking you to proceed. The chairman will set up the order in which people will be asked to speak. If at the appropriate point anyone wishes to ask a question, please use the raise hand link at the bottom of the participants list. The chairman will then be notified that you wish to ask a question, and he will invite you in the order he deems most appropriate. Once you have finished speaking, please lower your Zoom hand. If you have telephoned in, you won't be able to signal. So once participants who have raised the Zoom hand have asked their questions, I will ask the chairman to invite anyone who has telephoned in to ask their questions in the order that he wishes to do so. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will do so, and all parties will be advised of the revised time and date of this meeting. If it is a short adjournment only, you'll be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting. Does anyone have any questions about the way the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? I see no hands raised, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for that explanation. Can all participants hear me? Please raise your Zoom hand to confirm that you can. I don't see too many Zoom hands coming up, so where I've asked for Zoom hands to be used, it would be helpful if you can do that. Those of you who are not aware of that, perhaps, our clerk, Stephen, would you like to explain that one?
Yes, if you see there's a participants button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, if you click on that, you'll have a list of all attendees on the right-hand side. Then over the bottom of that right-hand side screen, you'll have a raise hand option. More blue hands are going up, so we're almost there. Also, Chairman, there are one or two who have joined by telephone, so we just need to get a verbal response from them that they can hear us.
Mr. Grant, can you hear us? Stephen, you may need to unmute him. I don't think he's able to unmute himself.
Yeah, I'm asking.
So he's call in user 3.
Yeah, I can see he's there. I'm asking him to unmute. Oh, hang on. Oh, I see.
I think Mr. Grant came in after your explanation, Stephen.
Yeah, so and I hope that Mr. Grant can hear. We can't hear him. If you could just look to unmute Mr. Grant. I'm putting forward a request that you unmute, which hopefully will prompt you to go to join.
I think it may require pushing #6 on your telephone.
While we're waiting, in terms of blue hands, I don't see one from Mr. Butterworth or indeed from Councillor Vickers.
I had done it and it had disappeared. So yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. And you're all welcome now to clear them. We've just established that we can all do it. However, we do need Mr. Grant's involvement. And I should explain for everybody else on this call, we can't really proceed until Mr. Grant confirms that he can hear.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is Mr. Grant speaking. You can hear me. Healthy.
We can hear you. Glad
okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
That's excellent. If you could now mute yourself again, because
I'll be honest with you. I don't know what button to press on the phone. I'm not savvy in that way. I never have been. I just press buttons. I ain't got a mute on this landline.
Stephen, do we have a way of handling this?
I can only suggest that Mr. Grant, if you can't sort of put the phone put us on hold.
If you want me to keep quiet, I will. But I won't be butting in.
If I tell you what, that's probably the option, Mr. Grant. We'll come to you to give you the option to speak at the relevant points. But yeah, if you, as you say, keep silent until then.
I'll be silent. I promise you. I won't butt in or nothing.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Grant.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
I will need to ask you at various points to confirm that you have heard, and you will have your own chance in due course. But
okay, and thank you.
Excellent. I'd like to confirm the application that we'll be hearing today is an application for a premises license, Gambling Act 2005 for Mercure slots. 11 to 13 Marketplace, Newbury, RG14 5AA. Has been made on behalf of Casino Gaming Limited. I'm supported on this morning's subcommittee by Councillor Tony Linden and Councillor Graham Bridgman. Councillor Rick Jones is present as a substitute, would only be called upon if one of the members is unable to continue with the meeting. The solicitor advising the subcommittee is Beth Varco. Joe Watt will maintain a record of the proceedings. We're also being assisted by Stephen Chard and Moira Fraser, who will be acting as the Zoom hosts of this meeting. Councillors Martha Vickers and Andy Moore are the ward members, and they will be invited to speak at the appropriate time during the proceedings. I understand the applicant's representative, Mr. Philip Colvin QC, is in attendance, and he's being supported by a number of associates at this meeting. Dr. Richard Bradley, solicitor, Popston Allen, for and on behalf of Casino Gaming Limited. Ms. Amanda Kiernan, Head of Compliance, Casino Gaming Limited. Mr. Andy Tipple, Head of Product, Casino Gaming Limited. Mr. Steve Ambrose, Operations Director, Casino Gaming Limited. Mr. Darryl Butterworth, Licensing and Security Authority Compliance Consultant. I understand the following objectors have notified us that they wish to speak. Graham Grant, who submitted his objection in the name of Alfie. Charlie Woodhead, who's being represented by his solicitor, Paddy Wurr. Council's licensing officer, Julia O'Brien, will introduce the application. I would just like to reiterate that I'll be asking all parties if they've been able to hear the discussion at the conclusion of each presentation and at the end of each question and answer session. If at any point in the meeting you have not been able to hear the whole discussion, could I please ask you to raise your Zoom hand, if necessary, let me know verbally if you're able to do so. We will then repeat that part of the meeting. So, have you all heard this introduction?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Yes.
Stephen, do we have a full set?
Almost.
Chairman, we're still waiting to hear from Andy Tipple, Richard Bradley, Philip Colvin. If they could raise their blue hands, please. Full house.
Full house?
Just to double check, Mr. Grant is happy with that. Mr. Grant?
I'm happy with that. Thank you.
He was quick to confirm. Great. Now, before I go any further to explain how the meeting will be conducted, please can I ask the members if they have any interest that they wish to declare? Members?
No, Chairman.
No, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go on to explain now how the meeting will be conducted. Firstly, I'll ask the licensing officer, Julia O'Brien, to introduce the application. Secondly, the applicant, their agents, Mr. Colvin QC and others as necessary. Once they concluded their presentation, I will invite the objectors to speak. In other words, Charlie Woodhead and his representative, Paddy Wurr, and Mr. Grant. The ward member, in this case, Councillor Vickers, will then have the chance to speak. I understand Councillor Moore is also present. He will be available to ask and answer questions. The applicant or the representative will then have the right to address any comments made. Can I remind you that all groups of speakers will have 10 minutes in total in which to make their case, which should take into account Section 1 of the Gambling Act 2005's 3 objectives: preventing gambling from being a source of crime or disorder, being associated with crime or disorder, or being used to support crime, ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair and open way, and protecting children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling. Now, at this point, I would like Councillor Bridgman to remind us of the statutory principle.
Chairman, thank you. I think the members thought it was important, given the publicity, if I can put it like that, that has surrounded this application, to remind members of the public in particular, and ward members, I'm sure, that Learned Counsel knows all this already, just to remind what the status of this subcommittee is in relation to applications for a premises license in respect of gambling. It's to be found in section 153 of the Gambling Act 2005, which I am going to read without any inflection. Principles to be applied. In exercising their functions under this part, a licensing authority shall aim to permit the use of premises for gambling, insofar as the authority think it, in accordance with any relevant code of practice under section 24, in accordance with any relevant guidance issued by the Commission under section 25, reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives subject to paragraphs A and B, and in accordance with the statement published by the authority under section 349, subject to paragraphs A to C, those preceding paragraphs. In determining whether to grant a premises license, a licensing authority may not have regard to the expected demand for the facilities which it is proposed to provide. This section is subject to section 166, and Chairman, section 166 relates to casino premises, and we're not discussing casino premises here. So that's just to remind the public of what our duties as a licensing subcommittee are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Moira Fraser will be timing the 10 minutes, and I will notify you. I'm sure she will promptly left. After each group of speakers has put forward their case, the subcommittee has the right to ask questions. Questions may be asked by the parties to the hearing, but these must be done through me and for the purposes of clarifying a statement made by the parties, and must be relevant to the application or the Council's gambling policy. I would therefore ask that if anyone wishes to put a question, they raise their Zoom hand. We will also be taking into consideration the representations of all the objectors listed in the agenda, as although they are not present, they have not withdrawn their objections. Once the subcommittee has heard all the representations, we will close this meeting, and the members will meet privately to make a decision. A written decision notice will be issued to interested parties setting out the verdict as soon as possible, but in any event within 5 working days of the hearing. Stephen, we need another check. Could everybody confirm that they have heard and understood the outline of how this meeting will be conducted?
Mr. Grant, I've heard.
Thank you.
Chairman, we're just waiting for Paddy Were.
Mr. Were, are you able to confirm? Thank you very much.
That's the full house then.
Excellent. In that case, could I please ask Julia O'Brien, the licensing officer, to introduce herself?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my name is Julia O'Brien and I'm here today on behalf of the Licensing Authority. And my role is a Principal Environmental Health Officer.
Has everybody heard Julia?
Yes.
Please confirm.
Just Mr. Colvin is checking his here. I think he can, but it's just the blue hand.
I can confirm, but I can't find my hand. Suddenly it's disappeared from my screen, so I'm handless, I'm afraid.
Do you have the list of participants up?
Yes, I do. And the hand which was there 2 minutes ago is no longer there.
There should be.
It's back. It's back. I'm going to raise it. I do apologize.
It does make life easier in one of these sessions. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you again and again to do that. Right, excellent. Thank you. Julia, please, can you proceed with introducing the application?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As you already outlined, this meeting this morning is to provide information, or I'm providing a report for information for the subcommittee to consider and determine the application by Casino Gaming Limited for a new bingo premises at 11 to 13 Marketplace, Newbury, postcode RG14 5AA. In accordance with section 163 of the Gambling Act 2005, determination of the application, and the statement of gambling principles, the application is referred to the licensing subcommittee to determine as representations have been received. So the subcommittee is asked to determine the application to grant or refuse the application with conditions and/or amendments as appropriate. So the background to the report today and why we're here. There was an application for a new bingo premises licence under the Gambling Act 2005, which was received by the Licensing Authority on the 18th of June 2020. You have in your bundle copies of the documentation which was received, which included the copy of the application, the notice of the application that was issued that would have been displayed on the premises, and also the newspaper notice that went into the local paper, the location and layout plan, operational standards, and the local area risk assessment. Also in your bundle today are all the representations which were received. I will talk a little bit more about them in a moment. The application was confirmed to have been correctly made, and the 28-day consultation period was started the following day, which ran until the 16th of July 2020. The applicant has also confirmed in writing, which there is a copy of actually I don't think there is a copy in the bundle, but I have a copy of the fact that he had copied the application and all the supporting documents to the responsible authorities. The responsible authorities, ward members and parish council members were also advised by the licensing authority via email on the 19th of June. Details of the application are as follows. So the applicant, as we have already said, Casino Gambling Limited, which will be trading as Mercure Slots. The times of operation, there was
Point
no...
of order, Chairman. Sorry, Julia. Is it Casino Gambling or Casino Gaming?
Check. Casino Gaming Limited.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
The times of operation, there was no request to exclude the default, the default condition regarding times of operation. So the default hours are Sunday to Saturday from 9 AM to 12 midnight as regards bingo. The application was advertised for the notice placed in the Newbury Weekly News on the 25th of June. As I said, there is a copy of that in your bundle. The site notice was checked and found to be on display on the 2nd of July this year. During the statutory consultation period of 28 days, representations were received from interested parties. There were no representations from any of the responsible authorities. So in your bundle, as I have said, there were the copies of the interested parties' representations. In terms of the responses from the responsible authorities, just to clarify, Thames Valley Police responded on the 13th of July with no objections, and the Fire Authority responded on the 6th of July with no representation. Environmental Health, the Gambling Commission, HM Revenue and Customs, Planning and Children and Young People Services gave no response. In terms of follow-up on this, the licensing authority with two of the interested parties had a mediation meeting with the applicant. So that was with Richard Bradley and Steve Ambrose and Amanda Kierman. Only one of the interested parties opted to attend this meeting, which was a gentleman we know as Alfie. There was no meaningful outcome for discussions of that, so hence the matter has come to the decision to be determined by the subcommittee, which it would have done in any case probably because one of the interested parties attended the mediation. I have a miscellaneous sort of update, although that has no relevance actually to this application, is that there is also a planning application in for this premises. But as I say, it has no relevance to this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, once again, please can everybody confirm they have heard the presentation?
Yes.
So may I mention that I heard 95% of it, but at some point during it, I was dropped out of the meeting for 30 seconds, which had happened once before a few minutes ago. So there may be an unstable connection either at your or my end, for which I apologise. But I certainly heard the thrust of what your officer had to say and agreed with it.
Beth, where does that leave us?
Can I just check, Mr. Colvin QC, that you're happy to proceed in light of what you have heard?
I am, thank you, because I'm sure it was all perfect. And in any case, I'm connected to the rest of my team by WhatsApp. So if anything terrible had happened in those 30 seconds, somebody would have told me. So I'm certainly happy to proceed.
I'm grateful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Otherwise, we have confirmation from everybody. Right, members, have any questions for the officer? No questions? No questions. This is
Chairman, I had my hand up. I think Stephen thought I'd still got my hand up from last time. I had taken it down and put it back up again.
In which case, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Vickers, this is members of the committee that I am referring to. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. Julia, you referred to the hours of operation and said Saturday to Sunday, 9 a.m. to midnight. And then you said, as regards bingo. And I want to just test that. And obviously I will also test that with the applicant when we get to that point. My understanding of the default conditions in the 2007 regulations is that the default condition, it reads that no facilities for gambling shall be provided on the premises between midnight and 9 a.m. So I wasn't restricting that to bingo. I was interpreting that as being gambling per se, including bingo, but also including gaming machines. So perhaps I can get your comment on that.
When she has a 24.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. If I can just read out, excuse me, read out the part 2 of the relevant regulations. Gambling Act 2005, Mandatory and Default Conditions, Regulations 2007, which relates to a bingo premise licence. So subject to paragraph 2, as you rightly say, no facilities for gambling shall be provided on the premises between the hours of midnight and 9 AM. Number 2 of that section says the condition in paragraph 1 shall not apply to making gaming machines suitable for use. So I'm sure that the applicant will be able to say in far more detail than I would be able to exactly what that means. But to me, that would enable gaming machines to be available for use outside of the hours that bingo is available for use.
Sorry, let me then continue with that line. And again, I will look to the applicant for comment. It says that the second part, to my mind, reads that gaming machines may be made available for use. So I can imagine that a member of, if the premises can be, the gaming machines can be used from 9 o'clock, a member of staff might be switching them on and getting them ready at 8:30 or something like that. So that's the way I interpret 2.2. But surely 2.1 says no facilities for gambling shall be provided on the premises between midnight and 9 AM. And I don't understand how that can be anything other than you can't use gaming machines, for example, or bingo machines on the premises if it's a bingo license, as distinct from all various other types of license, between those hours. I don't follow how we say that somehow permits other types of machine to be used.
As I say, that obviously this is open to interpretation, but that would be my reading of it. And that
Okay,
is
right, we'll leave it there, and I'll take it up obviously with my learned friend, Mr. Colvin, when we get to that point.
We will look forward to that discussion. Councillor Bridgman, do you have any other questions at this point?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Linden.
None, Chairman.
Thank you. In that case, all participants, can you confirm that you have heard that question and its answer thus far?
Yes.
Full house? Okay. Right. In that case, applicant, objectors, ward member, do you have any questions?
Thank you. I was getting a bit confused about whether I was allowed to speak here, but obviously I am. Well, my question probably would have been worded more simply, was around this business about whether we have an application here for 24-hour gaming, or is it time restricted? I just find on the original application, it says there is no reference to the time. It just says something about a default. And I think this is what Councillor Bridgman is talking about. So I found the wording a little bit complicated. So obviously we're talking about this, but there is, maybe we need further discussions. So my question was clarity over that, and whether the officers have ability to limit the hours of the operation if the clients are happy to do this. And also the difference between bingo and adult gaming, because I know we're just talking about the licensing here, and rather than the planning, but we have an application for bingo, and on the planning application it says adult gaming. So I know it's two different committees, but why do we have one term used on one application and another used on the other? So I'm just, as a relatively inexperienced member here, and I have to admit that, I'm just a little bit confused.
Julia, can you add anything else at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think particularly I can add anything else apart from to say that this is for a bingo application for a premises licence, but the bingo application by the default conditions would allow gaming machine use. But I think possibly it would be useful to wait to the applicant, who hopefully will be able to explain this in far more detail than I would be able to.
This is Alfie here. Am I allowed to ask a question now, please?
If the first one has been finished, then yes, I was about to ask you if you would like to.
Thank you. May I now start?
You may.
When I was at the mediator meeting, and I was the only person there, I did ask the people who are applying for this licence how many bingo machines there would be. And they told me there would be 21 bingo machines. Then I asked how many slot machines there would be, and the young lady who was there representing them said there would be 50 slot machines. So to me, if this is a bingo licence, how can you have twice as many slot machines to the bingo machines? That is my question.
Julia?
Sorry. I don't think that's actually a question for me. I think that would be a question for the applicant.
Shall we rephrase that then? Is that the question as put there, is that in any way in line with what you understood the application was for?
There is no requirement on the application that they have to put anything in terms of machines. It's for a bingo licence, but the bingo licence does enable machines to be had, but there are numbers that in terms of the categories of machines that they can have, but there's nothing that I am aware of that is providing bingo facilities are made that restricts the number of machines, if that makes any sense.
Then we will look forward to further discussion of that, no doubt, when Mr. Colvin has his time. Mr. Grant, is that satisfactory for now?
For now it is, yes. Thank you.
Right. Does anybody else have any further questions at this point? No? In that case...
Councillor Martha Vickers has her hand raised.
Is that an old hand or a new hand?
No, it's just clarity about the question about the timing. If the applicant was willing to alter the time, is the council able to, does it have jurisdiction to alter the timing? Is it under the council's power to say that we think the hours should be X and Y, or how much power is there with the committee?
Fair question, Julia.
It may assist if I answer that question. So the power of the licensing subcommittee is that it can exclude the default condition and add a separate condition that is more or less restrictive than the default condition. So that's the law. I hope that answers the question. Councillor Cole, I'll leave the rest of the meeting for you to reconvene.
I'm sorry?
Councillor Cole, I'm happy for you to return to the questions section.
Thank you. In that case, has everybody heard? Once again.
I did, yes.
House?
Correct, Chairman.
Right. I think it's now Mr. Colvin's time. Would you like to introduce yourself? Indeed, colleague.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. You very kindly introduced me and all of my colleagues, so I won't use up any of my time doing that. I know I've got 10 minutes, and I'm going to use it by making 9 brief points, and I know there'll be questions afterwards about machines and times and so forth.
We would actually have run your 10 minutes from after your introduction.
Ah, I was very anxious to stick to time. Well, let me do that then, sir. I've got with me Amanda Kiernan, who is the head of compliance at the company. I have also Steve Ambrose, the operations director, Andy Tipple, who is head of product, and I have Daryl Butterworth, who's an independent licensing consultant and former senior police officer. And I'm instructed by Mr. Richard Bradley of Poppleston Allen. So that comprises the team, but I will do the talking. But it may be that when there are questions, I may bring in one of the team to answer the question more directly.
That's excellent. Then at this point, can everybody confirm that they can hear Mr. Colvin?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Do we have a full house?
Chairman, I'm just waiting to hear from Councillor Rick Jones.
Yeah.
Councillor Jones. We still have nothing from Councillor Jones, who has not left the meeting but has turned his video off, or it's gone off. Right. Is Councillor Jones unable to confirm? Beth, what's our position? Do we need to phone Mr. Jones, Councillor Jones, to see if he is still with us?
Chairman, I have just tried to ring him and his mobile phone is engaged, which makes me wonder if he's trying to dial into the meeting.
Okay.
I've just put a call through. He's just about to rejoin. We're in business.
Apologies, Chairman.
Are you happy, Councillor Jones, that you have heard everything thus far?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Right. In which case, over to you, Mr. Colvin.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And as I say, I'm going to make 9 brief points. And point 1 is that there's no objections to this application from any responsible authority, including those dealing with crime and disorder, safeguarding and licensing. The police were specifically consulted in this case. Had there been concern with the application, one would have expected some sort of representation. My client has put in a large bundle of evidence, including witness statements and operational policies, which provide a bank of material explaining why there won't be any relevant impact. Secondly, my client, to introduce it, is one of the most experienced and largest operators of gaming on the high street in the UK. It's licensed by the Gambling Commission, so as the Commission advises, its suitability is not in question, nor are its systems to promote the licensing objectives, which are internationally accredited, nor is the quality of its national or area or local management, and nor are its staff training systems, which are designed to support the licensing objectives and which have been audited by the Gambling Commission and accredited by GamCare, and details of all of those systems have been provided to you. Thirdly, that it does all of this to a standard of excellence is reflected in the fact that it has 170 odd premises across the land and has never suffered a review of any of them. It plans its operations thoroughly, it trains its staff appropriately and repeatedly, and responds to any potential issues which might arise at premises from time to time after opening. It also subjects itself to regular audits from its field-based audit and compliance officers, and engages independent mystery shoppers and test purchasers to ensure that its local operations are up to the mark. And of course, it liaises appropriately with local agencies. Fourthly, the reason why my clients' venues are not on police radars is because they rarely generate crime and disorder. The demographic is just about 50% female. The surroundings are comfortable. Free tea and coffee and snacks are given out. Staff are not stuck behind a counter, but they walk the premises and chat to customers. The numbers attending at once are very low, usually a handful of customers at once. Players come in, usually alone or in couples. They play the machines for a while, they have a cup of tea, and they wander out again. You don't get loitering or disorder outside. Staff are trained actively to monitor the exterior, and CCTV is deployed inside and out. Any incidents are logged and reviewed at senior level, and reporting lines are established with local police teams. Fifthly, licensed bingo premises are entitled to serve alcohol. They're also entitled to admit children, but my client does neither of these things. There will be no children and no alcohol served or permitted in the premises. There will, however, be tea and biscuits. Sixthly, your policy doesn't contain any presumptions against licensing in particular locations. For example, it contains no equivalent of a cumulative impact policy. It's a merits-based policy, which is normal, if not typical, across the UK. Seventhly, if this license is granted, my client will be subject to extensive legal obligations. First of all, there are the Gambling Commission's License Conditions and Codes of Practice, which is a 34-page document at your page 178, which protect all of the licensing objectives. Secondly, there are the mandatory conditions imposed by government regulations on bingo premises licenses. And thirdly, there are conditions offered by my client, including full CCTV conditions at page 43 of our bundle. Supplementing that, the main aspects of the operational standards applied by my client to support each of the licensing objectives are set out at page 61. They were provided in support of the application without any issue being taken by the authorities, and they're the same standards that have been produced to a large number of authorities without criticism, and they synthesize the policies and procedures which have been approved by the Gambling Commission. The operational standards are then enlarged on in the manual, which is a 50-page document at page 207. Of course, I don't have time to go through this, but I commend them to you as a thorough and competent set of measures to promote the licensing objectives. Eighthly, the objections. I pass over the parts which are legally irrelevant. For example, a dislike of gambling, the question of need, demand, urban character, and also nuisance, which is not a licensing objective. But the thrust of what is being said is that the premises will be a source of crime and disorder. And I can only assure the licensing subcommittee that they just won't. There are numerous evidential pointers on this topic. Firstly, my client's other 170 premises are not a source of crime and disorder. Secondly, there's never been a review of any of the other licenses. Thirdly, my client's hugely experienced personnel who are here provide direct evidence in that regard based on decades of experience. Fourthly, Mr. Butterworth provides independent assurance based on his long experience as a police officer, but also his research and observations in connection with this application and other similar applications, both in Newbury and elsewhere.
Kevin, sorry, if I could just interrupt. Beth seems to have her hand raised. I don't know if she's had a problem. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Colvin-Kesey.
Sorry, my connection went after you mentioned that, Mr. Colvin-Kesey, that you had staff walking around the premises, and I was out for about 3 minutes. On the basis I'm the legal advisor of the meeting.
Yes.
Apologies, I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, I'm sorry.
Not at all. You're very right to.
I didn't hear that section. I'm very sorry.
And it would be a good idea. Can you go back to that section? And of course, the timing will be adjusted appropriately.
Yes, okay. I think where your legal advisor got cut off was I was just talked about how free tea and coffee and snacks were given out. And that last point was that, unlike in betting offices, staff aren't stuck behind perspex screens paying out bets, but they walk around the premises and they chat to customers. I pointed out that the numbers attending at once are low, usually a handful. And the way the premises operates is that players come in, usually alone, sometimes in couples. They play the machines for a while, have a chat, have a cup of tea, and they wander out again. What you don't get, which you sometimes get in betting offices, is loitering or disorder outside. Staff are trained to actively monitor the exterior, and also there's CCTV used inside and outside the premises, which is monitored. And if there are incidents, they are logged on tablets, and then they're reviewed at senior level on a regular basis. And also reporting lines are established with local police teams. I pointed out that although bingo premises can serve alcohol and can admit children, my client doesn't do that. That will not be happening at these premises. I pointed out that your policy doesn't contain any presumptions against licensing in any particular part of your area. Instead, it's a merits-based policy, which effectively has cases decided on the evidence. Seventhly, I pointed out that there are various legal obligations which apply to bingo licenses and would apply to this license if granted. Firstly, the Gambling Commission's license conditions and codes of practice, which attach to the operating license, and it's a very thorough document which deals with all of the licensing objectives. Secondly, I pointed out that there are mandatory conditions which come in under government regulation, which have already been referred to in this hearing. And thirdly, I pointed out that my client has offered a bank of individual conditions on the license, including full CCTV conditions, which are to be found at page 43 of our bundle. And then I said that these legal obligations essentially cascade down into what my client actually does through the operational standards, which are there to support the licensing objectives, which are set out at page 61 of our bundle. And I said that when those standards were provided, none of the responsible authorities took objection to them, but what they really intended to do was, for the benefit of the subcommittee, to collate and synthesize the policies and procedures which have been approved by the Gambling Commission. I then said that the operational standards are then enlarged upon and played through into my client's operating manual, which runs from page 207 to 254 of my client's bundle, and I commended that to you as a thorough set of measures which have been produced to many licensing committees around the country without any issue being taken by any of them. But it's also part of the annual assurance statement which my client provides to the Gambling Commission every year. I then went on to my 8th point, which was the objections which have been made. And I pointed out that some parts of the objections were legally irrelevant. For example, the dislike of gambling, that gambling is ethically or morally wrong, the question of need, the question of whether there's a demand for this kind of facility, the question of urban character, whether this fits in its urban setting, which is a planning matter, and also nuisance, which is not an objective of this legislation and is ruled out as relevant by the Gambling Commission, and was also ruled out incidentally in the parliamentary debates on the legislation. But the thrust of what is being said is that the premises will be a source of crime and disorder. And I was just getting to the point of saying that sometimes these fears are raised, but I can assure the subcommittee that they just won't be. This is an evidential hearing, so I was just pointing to the evidential indicators on the topic. Firstly, I said that my client has 170 premises across the country in all kinds of settings, and they have not proved to be a source of crime and disorder. There's no evidence they have been. Secondly, there's never been a review of any of my client's other licenses. Thirdly, my client has produced at this hearing personnel and people with about a century of experience between them, and they've given you direct evidence that my client's premises just don't generate crime and disorder. Fourthly, Mr. Butterworth is here and he's looked at Newbury, but he's also got experience from doing many of these applications, so he's been to see many other towns and cities, and he's got 30 years of experience as a senior licensing police officer, including a licensing police officer. His experience tells him that these premises just don't create crime and disorder in the way, for example, pubs and clubs sometimes do, and betting officers sometimes do. Fifthly, the main source of your local advice on this topic is the local police, who were specifically spoken to, but who have registered no concerns, and who in fact were quite pleased that my client gave assurances regarding CCTV and monitoring. Sixthly, there is no evidence of crime and disorder concerns in relation to the existing gaming centre in Northbrook Street. Seventhly, unlike the existing outlets, my client is offering a raft of conditions, including, as I've said, CCTV monitoring and all sorts of other conditions which you find in the bundle. And eighthly, as I've said, the numbers are low, alcohol is not involved, loitering does not happen, monitoring by CCTV takes place, good partnerships with local police are established, and so I can say categorically that my client's premises will not generate crime and disorder, but rather to the contrary, to have premises with a first-class CCTV system trained on the exterior, monitored by trained staff who are in touch with local police, is protective rather than detrimental. As against that, the objectors are entitled to make objections, and they've effectively spoken of a fear of crime and disorder, but they've produced no evidence that that fear will be realised. That fear is expressed from time to time when these applications are made, but my client's long experience is that after the licence is granted, the fears prove to be just that. They don't come to pass. But if Newbury turned out to be unlike my client's 170 other premises and became a hotbed of crime and disorder, then there's the right to bring a review. But with the greatest respect to the objectors, there's no evidence that that is what is going to happen. There is another objection alluded to, which relates to the protection of vulnerable people. And given the short time, I think I just need only say that my client complies with all of the national rules regarding protection of vulnerable people and more, and there's no evidence that it doesn't. And so in short, the objections it's fair to make objections, the system allows for it, but they're unsupported by any evidence, any responsible authority, any expert body, and they are answered by the extensive evidence my client has submitted. And ninthly and lastly, and then I'll shut up, cutting through all of this is the question posed at the beginning: will this application generate crime and disorder, which is more than just nuisance, or result in gambling, which is not open or fair, or harm or exploit children or vulnerable people? And I end by saying there's nothing in the history of the applicant, nationally or locally, or the content or style of its offer, or the layout of its premises, or its core demographic, or the training or supervision of its staff, or the kind of controls which it applies, or its system of audit, or the views of any of your expert advisors, which suggests that to permit gambling here will harm the licensing objectives. But regardless of this, and I just want to leave you with this note, if there were to be issues, there are very well-resourced systems in place to ensure that they are handled speedily, effectively, and professionally. And so accordingly, I ask that this application be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Colvin. Interesting. I suspect you probably got a few minutes extra there in your by going over some of that, but I think that was quite clear. Firstly, has everybody heard that?
Yes.
Confirm.
I mean, it looks like everybody has heard. We just need to check with Mr. Grant.
Yeah, I have said, I have heard. Thank you.
Mr. Grant confirmed early on. In that case, members of the subcommittee, do you have questions? I can tell you that I do. I think I'll take chairman's privilege and kick off with one. On the subject of Challenge 25, Think 25. You have a Think 25 policy, which comes across to me as Challenge 25, and it's called that in compliance point 28. What point are you making in calling it Think 25?
I think you've stumped me there. I think that the origins of these schemes, there was a Challenge 25 scheme and a Think 25 scheme, but they operate in precisely the same way. I think challenge implies you will be challenged, but Think 25 is more of a direction to staff that they have to think. They don't think to themselves, is this person 18? They think, is this person 25? But the effect is exactly the same. If somebody appears to be under 25, they won't be allowed to play and they will be asked to leave. If they can't produce valid ID to prove that they're at least 18. It may be that one of my clients will be able to explain the origins of why we refer to think as opposed to challenge. Just please feel free to come in.
Mr. Ambrose.
Yeah, Philip, I can help you out there. The terminology think in prefix, which actually started at Think 21, was through the trade organisation BACTA. That was brought in, but we decided to take the Think 25 approach.
Right. But can you just confirm that as I've described the scheme, it operates in exactly the same way as Challenge 25?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Who would like to ask a question?
If Mr. Alfie, can I speak for my 10 minutes now?
No, you can't. Not yet.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quiet and thank you.
We will bring you in as and when, but at this point...
Okay, much obliged to you, Chairman. Thank you.
So, Councillor Bridgman, do you have a question?
Chairman, it won't surprise you, and it certainly won't surprise officers. I have more than one question, so here we go. Let's start with, just to clarify something, we have an application by Casino Gaming trading as Merca Slots, but there is reference in some of the documentation to Precipe, so I just wanted to clarify what Precipe was and where it sits.
Thank you. It's all part of the corporate structure. I will get, probably Mr. Ambrose is the right person to give you chapter and verse.
Yep, so Precipe is the, I suppose, the UK company, and then Merca Slots is the trading element to that. And Casino Gaming is obviously the license applicant.
Okay. Next question. We know that there is a planning application before the planning committee on Wednesday for change of use, and there is reference on the plans to being proposed plans. I'll come back to the plans in a moment, but can I just clarify when is it anticipated these premises will be ready?
Again, I'll pass that on.
Would like to answer that.
Is Mr. Ambrose still there? Can somebody tell us how long it would take to get these premises ready, please?
Once both planning and licensing have been issued, you're looking at a build program of between 4 and 6 weeks.
Thank you. Right, let me cross these off as I go through them so I don't ask the same question twice. Now, looking at the plans, I'm looking at the plans on pages 46 and 47 of your bundle, as opposed to, I mean, one of them was the plan which was with the application in the first place, but I think this is clarification. We have two plans, one showing a potential, I suppose, layout of machines within the premises, but the one I'm more interested in is, because I think it, correct me if I'm wrong, should be treated as the application plan, is at page 46 of your bundle. Now, there were two comments in relation to that, looking at the regulations. Given that there are no children intended to be allowed on the premises, therefore we don't have to concern ourselves with sort of internal demarcation. We're simply concerned with the red line and the entrance and exit. So the first thing is that the plan shows an entrance from Marketplace. Now, I know it sounds a little technical, but the regulations talk about entrance and exit. So just to confirm, for the purpose of the application, that entrance is also the exit, and there is one single entrance and exit for the public to and from the premises, and that is onto Marketplace.
So that is my understanding. If anyone on my team has a different understanding, they will chip in, but that is certainly as it appears from the plan.
And the second one is that the word proposed is on this plan. Now, I understand why it's on the other one about layout, but clearly we must deal with a plan which is final. It will be the licensing plan, and the premise will have to be operated in accordance with that licensing plan and the red line, very importantly. So can I confirm that if a license were to be granted, a premises license were granted, this would be the final plan?
It would, yes.
Thank you. Okay, that's that one. Now, on the conditions, and I take you to page 39, I think, of the pack, your pack.
Yeah, 39 on the right.
Condition, yeah, page 39 on the right. Yeah, it's labelled as 43, but I'm looking at the handwritten numbers down the side.
Yeah.
Proposed license condition 3 refers to an incident log to be kept. Now, there's no, in the way that there is a retention period for CCTV at 1, there is no retention period, simply says it's going to be kept and made available. I suggest that what we would want is some form of retention period for that log. I would suggest that it should be 31 days in the same way as CCTV.
Well, I would certainly have no objection to that. I mean, sometimes when you get nightclubs, magically incident sheets get lost. And so conditions say things like there must be a bound incident book. And so it may go back even longer than 31 days. But certainly we would have no objection at all if you wrote any period in that, whether that was a month or 3 months or 6 months. Can I also just mention that the staff effectively walk around with a smart tablet. So if anything happens, they enter it on the tablet, so there's a permanent record, and then that permanent record is siphoned off to area and head office and is then regularly reviewed. So there is essentially a permanent digital record, but we'd be really happy if you were to write in a retention period so it's clear for everybody.
Okay.
Councillor Bridgman, may I just butt in at that moment, since we're talking around, I'm trying to understand the operation of this. Do the staff have somewhere to sit, or are they expected to wander around? Is this what you might call a permanent moving around so they can see what's happening?
Yeah, it's a very key feature you raised there, sir, in relation to bingo premises as compared to betting offices. So in betting offices, the staff are largely static. In fact, in almost every betting office, they're static behind a perspex screen, which may be set halfway back in the premises, but more typically at the back of the premises. And when the racing is on, they're very heavily engaged in taking bets and paying out bets. Whereas in these bingo premises, the staff are continually walking the premises. So as soon as you walk in to one of these high street bingo premises, there will be a staff member within a very few seconds to say hello and how can we help? So that it's one of the reasons that you just don't get troubles is that they're in charge of their domain.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman.
Yeah. Now, just going to the original public document pack at page 7, we have part of the original application. If I start with 17, because I did just ask you about when the premises were going to be ready, and we have a proposed commencement date, an immediate commencement date. My question, therefore, is if these premises would take 4 to 6 weeks, subject to all the authorizations, to be put into a fit state, what your position would be on, for example, a condition that the license wouldn't be triggered as and until there had been an inspection by licensing officers to confirm.
Yeah, I think doesn't normally happen with these bingo premises, but we'd call that a works condition. And I can't see there'd be any objection to that at all. It would just give you assurance that the premises wasn't going to open until effectively it was ready to trade.
Okay,
So
well that's got all the easy ones out of the way. Now let's get to the meat of the one. You heard my questions to Ms. O'Brien on what the default conditions mean. I note that at 15A on the same page, there is no objection to the default conditions by the applicant. So let's just test what your position on default is and the timings and what the regulation 2.2 or regulation part 2.1, if I can put it like that. This is schedule 2, part 2, part 1. About what we mean by gambling and therefore what that all means in relation to the hours of midnight and 9 a.m.
Sure. So there isn't any legal dispute about this across the land or in the minds of the Gambling Commission or anybody else. We're looking at, just for your legal advisors and any observers' notes, the Gambling Act 2005, mandatory and default conditions, England and Wales regulations of 2007. And then there are mandatory and default conditions for all sorts of different gambling premises licenses, everything from casinos to bingo to betting offices and so forth. When you're into Schedule 2, Part 1 deals with bingo premises license mandatory conditions, and then Part 2 reads default conditions attaching to bingo premises licenses, and paragraph 1 of that says subject to paragraph 2, no facilities for gambling shall be provided on the premises between the hours of midnight and 9 a.m. Now, the facilities for gambling, which under the Gambling Act you're allowed to provide within bingo premises, licensed premises, are bingo and gaming machines. So subject to paragraph 2, no facilities for gambling may be provided between midnight and 9 a.m. But then when you get to paragraph 2, it says the condition in paragraph 1 shall not apply to making gaming machines available for use. And so gaming machines are an express statutory exception to the stricture on hours imposed by paragraph 1. And if I can tell you that my clients, 170 premises, of which I think about half are bingo premises and half are adult gaming centre premises, there's a very, very small handful which have licensed hours imposed, which restrict the use of machines to below 24 hours. Now, that is not the same as saying that they always trade 24 hours. And there's 2 reasons they might not. The one is because operationally they don't choose to. And another reason might be that in some cases there's a planning condition which restricts the hours. But the number of cases where licensing authorities have seen fit to restrict hours are extremely few and far between. And the reason for that is effectively the reason that I've given, which is that premises just don't generate crime and disorder. Now, just to complete the story, your counsel, I think it was Councillor Vickers, was asking whether you had jurisdiction to limit those hours, and if it will help you if I ask you when you have a moment, perhaps not now, to look at page in handwriting 79 on the right, which deals with the imposition of conditions. And it says that you've got to aim to permit the use of premises for gambling, as you've read out, and so shouldn't attach conditions that limit their use, except where it's necessary in accordance with the licensing objectives. So you could limit that if you thought it was necessary, not just appropriate, but necessary in accordance with the licensing objectives. And then at paragraph 9.31, there's a set of tests which the Gambling Commission sets out. Conditions have to be relevant to the need to make the building suitable. They've got to be directly related to the premises and so forth, fairly and reasonably related to the scale and type of premises, and reasonable in other respects. Now, those reasons don't include nuisance, because the licensing objective is in relation to crime and disorder. But my instructing solicitors have also appended at page 80 the parliamentary debate on this topic, where there was a question about whether nuisance should be added as a licensing objective, so that perhaps one could attach a condition to restrict hours to prevent nuisance. And this was rejected by Parliament. And in particular, if you look at page 81, you've got Mr. Richard Cabourn, the then minister, talking about this and saying there's no well-established association between betting and nuisance, unlike alcohol and nuisance, and there's no reason to single out betting shops for special treatment in contrast to grocery shops, newsagents, or any other shop. So you do have jurisdiction, but with the greatest respect, you don't have any evidence in this case upon which that jurisdiction could be exercised.
Thank you for that. Whilst you were speaking, I was just considering what had been referred to in the local area risk assessment provided by you. So on page handwritten 48 of the pack, part of that risk assessment refers to 4 other gambling premises within Newbury. Yes. And I just wonder whether and I suspect you won't know, but I wonder whether your client knows what the hours of operation of those 4 are.
Yeah, I've been trying to get into a licensing register for West Bucks, and I just haven't succeeded. I'm told there are no conditions, for hours on those other premises, but 3 of them are betting premises and so don't have the same default hours as bingo premises. And one of them is a AGC, I think it's an AGC, up on Northbrook Street, and we're not aware of any hours on that. And of course, during COVID, we can't check their hours because they're stuck with the hours that they've got. We're not aware of hours restrictions on the other ones. So I think all I can do is point more generally at my clients' premises around the country, which include all sorts of areas. It really is a very small percentage which have any licensing restrictions in terms of...
So just to finish then on 2 points on that. No.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Grant here. I do know the hours of all the premises, if you wish to know.
Hold on. I was going to ask that question, and I accept what you say about 3 of them being betting premises. And of course, the hours that they are open and the hours they advertise that they are open may not be licensed hours. It may simply be operating hours within a set of licensed hours. I accept that as well. But will you take it from me that when I looked at a web search on casino slots, I was informed by the response that they were open till 10 at night. So that is one of my points/questions back to you. And the other one is just to confirm, therefore, that some of your clients' premises in the country do have restricted hours.
A very small number, yeah, a very small number. I mean, can I just point to? I mean, there's a nightclub, for example, called Zinc, which trades, I think, till 3 o'clock in the morning, the weekends, and I think one of the objectors runs a kebab shop, which trades till 5 o'clock in the morning at the weekends. All I can say is that the numbers that my client attracts during nighttime hours are minuscule, and we're talking, 1, 2, 3 or 4 people, and they're not there making whoopee. They're there having a cup of tea and having a little flutter on the machines and then wandering off into the night. So it's not always a useful comparison to point to other premises, but you certainly do have premises with late hours operating in Newbury at night.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
That's my questions, Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to add in 1 or 2 of my own, and then I'm going to come to Councillor Linden, who I'm sure has some for himself. Proposed license conditions. It's typed page 43 of the big pack rather than handwritten. Number 6. I was curious to know how you are defining excessive alcohol. And also, why does this not cover the influence of drugs?
Well, it certainly could, and we wouldn't mind that at all. I think these conditions sometimes evolve because my client is asked by somebody, would you let someone in who's tipsy? And my client said, no, and we'd be very happy to have that attached as a condition. And so it then just stays on the list of conditions. I think the simple answer is if somebody did try to get in and they appear to be under the influence of alcohol on any of the usual tests, not coming in, because my client will not have people who've taken excessive alcohol gambling. And you'd get the same answer from a casino or an adult gaming centre. The staff have got to make a judgment about whether somebody's in a fit state. If they're not in a fit state, then they shouldn't be gambling. And the Gambling Commission's definition of vulnerability is somebody who gambles more than they want to, more than they can afford to, or someone whose decisions about gambling are impaired through either a condition which they have, which is permanent, or temporary, such as drugs or alcohol. And certainly if you felt that it was appropriate to give you extra assurance in this case, and that shouldn't just read alcohol, it should read drugs, absolutely, my client would have no issue or problem with that at all.
Okay, and you would therefore apply that to the operational management plan and security measures which come on the next pages of that pack. That sounds pretty good to me, if we were to agree. I have a curiosity here. For a business that is clearly going to rely on things electronic, perhaps the internet, I tried to look at the website, and that is the casino website, which gave me a certificate authority invalid, a warning that my connection was not private. The web page was blocked and the council system wouldn't let me in. Now, that's not a terribly good advertisement for business, is it?
Well, that sounds extraordinary. I don't know. I don't know who I can ask about that. I have to say, sometimes if I'm trying to reach a valid website on my mobile phone, my own firewall takes, becomes shocked and says somebody may be trying to impersonate your, maybe trying to impersonate this website. So I don't know whether your own PC picks something up, but I'm going to ask maybe Mr. Tipple to come in and see and help out on that topic.
It told me that I had tried to access a web page which is in violation of the internet usage policy.
Oh, I wonder whether that was the council's internet usage policy.
Chairman, point of order. I suspect that's our systems.
That is a firewall. We have no, I think that's from your side, not ours, unfortunately.
No, it's the certificate being invalid. That's a matter of being out of date, almost certainly. I've met that before. Let's move on.
I have to say, as a licensing barrister who sometimes has to deal with sex licensing, I get all sorts of messages back when I'm trying to research in my field of practice.
Could I also, for a bit of background perhaps, compliance, I'm very pleased to see that you've not yet had a review, but I am curious to know, since you audit, what percentage of the audits necessitate revisits, and how much do you bar customers? Maybe once a year across the 170 venues, whatever it is, or once a year per venue. What are we talking about here?
Okay, I'd be really happy to deal with both of those. Can I talk about, just to say a little word about barring, and I'll hand it over either to Amanda Kiernan or Steve Ambrose. There's different ways that customers might stop coming into the premises. So if a customer's behaviour indicates that a customer interaction is warranted, which is a gambling commission concept, and operators are obliged to implement that concept by the staff observing people's gambling and other behaviour. Once a customer interaction is initiated, various things might happen. One thing is the customers say, I'm just going to leave the shop now, and they might just make a voluntary decision not to come back in. And or they might be referred to literature which is prominently placed in the premises, which signposts them to gambling help organisations such as GamCare. And they might get in touch with that sort of organisation and again make an elective decision that they're going to control their gambling. It may result in their take-up of an app which isn't part of the law, but is part of the protections which my client implements, called a Playwright app, where a customer is entitled to set parameters on their gambling, either by way of time or amount, so that when they come in, they're effectively limited in how much gambling they can do. Fourthly, it might result in another gambling commission concept called self-exclusion, whereby the customer signs a self-exclusion agreement whereby they will not be permitted to come into the premises. The self-exclusion under Gambling Commission rules has to be at least 6 months, but not more than 12 months, renewable, and they must be able to renew without having to come back into the gambling premises. If you self-exclude now from one of my clients' bingo premises, you have just self-excluded from all bingo premises of all operators nationally. The last route into not coming back in is if the staff member takes the view that you really shouldn't be coming in, then they have the opportunity to bar you. So look, I'm really sorry, because of the way you're behaving, we can't permit you to come back in. Now, Sophie, I'm then going to just hand over to Amanda Kiernan to see whether she's able to give you an indication of how often a repeat audit is necessary because of something which doesn't go well, and or whether she can give you any indication about how often people are barred one way or the other through self-exclusion voluntarily or compulsorily. Let me give you to Amanda.
Hello. Yeah, so currently across the whole estate, and this is including national self-exclusions, which may not be directly from our venues, we have 2,000 self-excluded customers. Those customer details are retained on a GDPR secure tablet, and the venues are told they have to review that tablet on every shift start to see if there's any new self-exclusions. Whilst it is a voluntary thing that the customers entered into, we do take a responsibility to try and support those customers if they do breach. Now, if they should breach, we record that on this tablet system and ask them to leave the premise. So that's self-exclusions. And I report our self-exclusions to the Gambling Commission every quarter. And then we have barred customers. Now, these are locally barred, obviously, because the venue knows that customer, they've had that interaction. They wouldn't necessarily bar a customer until they've had a series of interactions to try and help them and guide them through their gambling. But if we feel the need and the customer doesn't want to self-exclude, we will enforce a bar on them. And that information, again, is held on this tablet, so all the venue staff are aware that that is a barred customer, and should they try to enter the premise, they will ask them to leave. And just, if you don't mind me just adding on to the Playwright app, with the Playwright app, the customer can ask for a notification to go to that tablet system in the venue if they should come into the venue when they've chosen not to. And then if they do that, the staff will interact with that customer to say, you've chosen not to come in at this time on the Playwright app. I'm just informing you that I've had an alert. And then they will do an interaction with that customer. And again, record that on that tablet system. All of this data on the tablet system comes centrally to a hub that my team review. And we provide statistics to Steve Ambrose's area managers so that they, when they visit the venues, can go through those interactions, those barred customers, and the self-exclusions with the teams in the venues. And again, we do report all of our test purchasing to the Gambling Commission on a quarterly basis as well.
And Amanda, the Councillor Cole was also asking about audits needing to be repeated.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yes, sorry. I have a field-based team of auditors, and they cover all different modules of auditing, but one of them is specifically around regulatory compliance, about vulnerable, about crime. It is a standard template, so we can measure all the venues against, their performance on regulatory compliance and how they're managing their customers. And if there is a poor result, that venue will get revisited by my audit team, but will also get special attention from Steve Ambrose's team. The area manager is responsible to make sure he goes and addresses those weaknesses that might have been identified in the audit.
What I was trying to get at was some form of percentage, rough percentage of the amount of audits that needed a revisit.
Okay.
The approximate numbers of barred customers. I understand the principles that you are applying, but that wasn't quite answering my question. Since you've raised the subject of self-exclusion, I'm curious to know, there is this process, the process requires a photograph to be taken. What happens if the customer refuses to have their photograph taken? Can they not self-exclude?
I'll be honest, I haven't had any customers refuse to have their photo taken on self-exclusion. It's one of the requirements. They may they may choose not to self-exclude. You're quite right if they don't want to have their photo taken, but the rules of the self-exclusion system is that we do need to get a clear photograph.
And can you help on the percentage of audits which require a re-audit?
I can, yep. So every venue will get a minimum of 2 regulatory compliance audits per year. And I have just done the stats for the last year to date, and there were 2 venues had to be revisited.
Okay, that was what I was after. Thank you. Councillor Lendon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to know what the hours of the your Newbury operation you're proposing to allow customers to come in. Is it on a 24-hour basis or whatever, or what?
Yeah, my client would like to run a 24-hour operation and would certainly like to have a license to do that. It'll then open. I imagine if there were a little bit less demand than it anticipates, then it may not choose to operate all the hours, but certainly its intention at this point is to run a 24-hour business.
And with the question asked by Councillor Bridgman in terms of gambling cannot take place between midnight and 9 o'clock in the morning.
So between midnight and 9, my client cannot offer bingo, but assuming that the license was granted as asked, between 12 and 9, it couldn't operate bingo, but it could operate the machines.
Right, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. What haven't we dealt with here?
We just need to check that everybody's heard all of those questions, and then we can go on to the panel, the parties asking questions.
We could, but I think I'd like to ask one more question, and then we'll do that check, as we wouldn't want to do another check. In the meantime, I think I had one more. Yeah, money laundering. I know money laundering is not really a part of this. It is done at Gambling Commission level. But again, I'm trying to get a feel for what this is about. Is there a maximum amount of cash that a customer can walk in with?
I don't think it operates in that sort of way, other than if somebody walked in and pulled out a big wad, the staff would be very much on alert. But the client does have some quite sophisticated processes to identify signs of money laundering through the machines. And without giving away too many secrets, I'm sure that somebody, I don't know whether it's Mr. Tipple or Amanda Kiernan, would just be able to help you as to how MLR works at premises level.
Hi, yeah, I can address that. So we all of our systems are connected to a data capture system, and we have the facility in there that it can alert if there's a succession of notes going in with minimal machine play, and that will be one indicator. But also our staff are trained in noticing if there's any anti-money laundering incidents going on, really, and they know their customers, and they would alert whether they could check on the systems if they suspected that something was going on regarding money laundering, so money going into a machine and then going through the change machine. They can look on the system, which is on the floor on their service area, and check against CCTV, which is linked, to see if there is any odd activity going on with the machines with regards to money laundering.
Okay. Right, now for a check. Has everybody heard all of those questions and answers?
Yes.
Right, we had a full set. I think
Looks that way, Chairman.
All right. Now, that's the end of the members' questions. Objectors and ward members, that must be your turn. Does anybody else have questions at this stage, or the applicant?
Does that include me?
If you have a question rather than a statement, yes.
What a question. Can I ask a question now to the QC person, please?
You can.
He gave a wonderful display. I thought he was actually asking planning permission for a church social hall, the way he was describing this. I don't mean to be facetious, but he never mentioned once about the ATM machines being on all their premises. Now, I'll go read a quote here out of the credit. The licence neither make nor receive any payment or reward, whether by way of commission or rent otherwise. But their reward would be that the customers are in the shop and they take your money out the ATM machine to play their machine. So that would be their reward. And I went to London for 3 days.
What is your question, Mr. Grant?
The question is, why was it skirted round that at no moment did they mention ATM machines? Surely that got to be a main feature to one of the shops, to their business.
We can ask Mr. Colvin if there will be an ATM present, and we can...
Well, there will be, because all the other shops are ATMs.
Mr. Colvin.
Can I just ask one of the Kachino staff to state whether there will be ATM machines on these premises?
Please do.
Duly asked.
When we open the shop, there won't be an ATM in this shop.
But will there be one?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. There will or there will not?
There will not be an ATM in this shop when we open the premises, no.
But not opening, but what, say in 6 months' time? Why would you make an exception to one shop in Newbury when all your other premises have got ATM machines? Is Newbury a special place for people? Ain't they got credit cards or debit cards in Newbury?
Not all our premises have ATM machines. Some do, some don't.
All the ones I've been in, AMT machines. So how many of your premises haven't got AMT machines then?
How many haven't got ATMs? I think there's about, I'd say around 70 premises don't have ATMs in them.
How many?
70.
70 don't have AM, and can you make a promise here today then that you'll never put an ATM machine into that shop?
Well, whatever Mr. Tipple says, so there are rules on the use of ATM machines
Look, let me explain one thing. Bookmakers cannot take credit cards. An I'm sorry, I'll go say hole in the wall machine, it make it easier for me. An hole in the wall machine can take credit cards. So on these premises here, they can put a credit card in.
They can't take credit cards, sorry. They can't take credit cards.
They can't take credit cards. Well, I went out this morning and got money out on an ATM machine, on a credit card, and I also got money out on a debit card to prove my point.
Not in our premises.
Sorry?
Not in our premises, you can't.
Well, I wouldn't like to argue the point. I was in one of your premises in London and took money out on the credit card. Because I was tough. Now, I'll be honest, I don't mean to be pushy. I spoke to six of your people in London and 3 in the Midlands. Some of them was very nervous to talk to me, so I had to become best mates and all that and talk about Arsenal football team, which I'm a Tottenham supporter, I had to speak. And after the third day I went in there, they said it is an in-house policy to have these machines in your premises to keep customers in there. Because they're frightened if customers go out to the hole in the wall in the bank, now look up at the sky and realise they have lost enough money already. But if they use your machines within your shop, it's like you already captured them already.
Mr. Grant, this is not really a question anymore, is it?
Well, I don't know, sir. The point is...
You're making a statement. You're making a statement, Mr. Grant. Which
I'm sorry, I'll finish now, Ian. They skirted around this question, and I would have thought they would have said in their promotion, we have ATMs in these shops. They got signs outside their shops.
Okay.
Well, I've got photographs of with the sign on.
You have made your point.
Right, okay, Ian. I'll be quiet now. I'll make a statement later on.
Okay. And you have no other questions?
Oh, the other question was to Mr. Tibble, actually. I believe I got his name wrong. What was I say? Would you believe that the problems with the machines at the moment, where there's been so much fuss over machines, the slot machine. Would you believe that was caused by the fix-off machines in betting offices?
So I didn't quite hear that question, but if I think I understand the gist of it. The content of machines, the staking levels, the prize levels, what they do, how they do it.
Fix-off machines.
Sorry, Mr. Grant, you're interrupting me. And the speed of play are all governed by government regulations and by a bible of requirements, which are called the Gambling Commission's technical requirements for machines. They're really not matters which a licensing committee would go into, because what you're concerned with is whether the premises is suitable to be licensed for gambling.
No, hang on. I'm reading the statement, what Mr. Tibble put in the supplementary statement.
Mr. Grant, you've had an answer to...
No, can I just say, please, let me say one more thing, because this is important. It's saying we do not operate fixed odds betting terminals in their shops. And the paper next door to me, for bingo, Bingo Riches, where you can play up to £4 a game, is a fixed odds game machine. Lucky Charm Bingo, you can play up to £4 a game.
Different operator. Mr. Grant, that's a different operator.
It was in your promotion. I got it together. The council gave this promotion to me on Friday. The pages. On page 74. It's a photograph, and your statement is on page 19. You say on there we do not do fixed odds machines. And funny enough, the fixed odds machines in betting offices, you can only bet up to £2. On your machines, you can bet up to £4 a game.
I think you're referring to the B2 machines, which originally what I'm referring to is the FOBTs of the B2 variety, which you could stake up to £100, which we can't provide and don't provide.
I didn't say £100. I said you got it in your. I got it. Look at page 74, please.
No, but you
photographs of the machines.
Can I repeat my earlier point, which is all of this is a matter of national regulation.
I appreciate that, sir. But Anthony Tibble made a statement there that his company do not have fixed odd machines. On the page, that is on page 19. On page 74, there's a photograph of two machines where they do fixed odd machines. And he's telling me it's for another company. Well, is he advertising another company beside his?
So I'll certainly be glad to help if I'm required to on this topic.
I'll wait till I can make my statement later on.
Can we leave it there?
I'm sorry if I caused any problems. I apologise. If you read my letter there, what I've sent with the statement, I'm a free agent and everybody should have the right to be the free agent.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Right,
thank you, Mr. Grant. At this point, once again, has everybody heard that sequence of questions and answers? That looks like a full house, I think.
It is, Mr. Chairman.
In which case, I'm going to go on to our objectors. I'm going to start with Mr. Ware.
Chairman, sorry, Councillor Martha Vickers has had a hand raised to ask a question. Apologies.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot, it's been a very extensive amount of material that we've been given, and obviously the operators are responsible people. They made a lot of the training they give their staff on safeguarding issues and how to deal with difficult clients whom they think are at risk. They say they repeat the training every 6 months, but I couldn't see in the papers what the length of this training is. So what is the length of this training? They're actually asking a lot of their staff, and I don't know what the average age of their staff is. I would imagine some of them are relatively young and inexperienced in life, possibly. And to actually go up to somebody who's having a problem, whom they think has had enough and should leave, to actually exclude people they think might be slightly drunk, to challenge people over their behaviour, that's quite a big ask for people who are young and relatively inexperienced. And I'm wondering about the ability of their staff to do this, and about you know, whether this is asking a lot of relatively untrained staff. So what is the length of the training?
Okay, I'm going to hand that over. I mean, I would say that these rules about customer interaction, self-exclusion, challenge, and so forth have been part of the gambling national rules since 2007, when the Gambling Act came in. And if staff get it wrong, then the Gambling Commission come down on them like a ton of bricks, and you only have to open the papers to see what the Gambling Commission does when staff don't exercise the responsibilities they should have. And so my client is extremely anxious to make sure that the rules are complied with, and this is audited and checked on both by management, area management, and through the compliance audits. But so far as the length of training is concerned and the repetition and so forth, I'm going to invite either Steve Ambrose or Amanda Kiernan again to see if they can assist with that.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, so we have a couple of training platforms. We have compliance, and we also have safeguarding vulnerable. And all staff do that as onboarding before they can even go into a venue. And we have a couple of training centres that staff will go to do some sort of face-to-face training. And then every 6 months, that training is sort of, it's altered. So it is different every way. So there's different questions. So to reinforce their understanding. So it isn't, although it is a platform training, it isn't just a simple tick box, yes, I've done it. They do actually have to go through it, and then they get tested on each stage of the training. And then that level of training is monitored centrally by our learning and development team. But it's also touched on our internal audit visits and our area manager visits. So they will review how staff are actually interacting with customers and the staff level of confidence. I do take on the point that we do have some young people working for us, but we also have an awful lot of people that have been with us a long time, 20, 30 years. And, they're very good at sort of imparting that training down through their teams. So we do very much make sure the training comes from the top down. And it is reviewed really when any sort of visitor from head office goes to the venue. They will look at how people are interacting with customers.
It sounds as though most of this training is online, but there's a bit of face-to-face. But when you're talking about something that involves human interaction and dealing with difficult people that might get angry, people that, I mean, obviously your employees aren't expected to counsel these people. They're not counselors. It just seems to be you're expecting a lot of them. And if you're talking about something that involves human interaction and dealing with difficult people, you can't do that online. So you need some quite extensive face-to-face training. Also, how many people do you have on duty at a time? Do you always have 2? And is one of those people on duty experienced and able to deal with difficult people? I know you say you don't have problems and everything's fine, but you never know what's going to crop up, and I'm expecting that you feel you need to be prepared for this. So I just think, this is potentially a difficult area. And are you expecting too much of your staff here?
If I can just sort of respond in addition to Amanda, we do have our training, learning and development department. So in an example for Newbury, 4 weeks prior to opening, we would begin our training with our employees, and that would be blended learning. So there is, you're right in terms of there's an amount that's online, but there's an awful lot that are supported by the operational trainers and also our technical trainers as well. And that facilitates face-to-face training. That will take place, if I give a normal example, that would take place with the employees visiting another venue and working in that venue, working alongside colleagues and receiving face-to-face training. Clearly, we're in slightly different times at the moment, and the training will be facilitated by our technical trainers and our operational trainers attending the training centre as well, and going through the workbooks with the employees, reviewing their online training, And I say that train element is around about 4 weeks, depending on how quickly they pick things up, and also to what level in terms of an employee, whether a lead supervisor or just a normal supervisor. I think it's important to remember also that the venues are visited on a frequent basis, at least once every 2 weeks, by area managers, and they're part of the operational team, and they'll review the ongoing practices and procedures to ensure that they're implemented correctly. And it's hard to put in this meeting, but that's our ethos. That's the way that we operate. We're very much, as myself being based in Milton Keynes, I feel very much part of every single one of our operating venues up and down the country.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's quite an extensive sort of explanation, and you know, that sounds as though you keep this under review. Can I also ask a sort of simple question, which I think might come under here? If you're going to be 24 hours, if you're open extensively when nowhere else is open in the town, do you provide a customer toilet? There is a toilet premises, but I'm not quite sure whether that's for staff.
Yeah, it is for staff and customers. There is a toilet on the premises in common with all of my clients' premises.
Customers also. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions at this point?
Chairman, Councillor Bridgman has his hand raised. Councillor
Bridgman.
Chairman, yes, I just wanted to clarify something that arises from the questioning of Mr. Grant. It's for Mr. Tipple. Can I take Mr. Tipple to his statement that was being referred to, paragraph item 7 of his supplemental statement, which is on typed page 19 of the pack from the applicant, about casino not operating fixed odds betting terminals. Okay, and in the reference to GTAB bingo tablets, starting at page 67, in specifically handwritten page 67, handwritten specifically page 70. In respect of both Bingo Riches and Lucky Charm, there is a reference to fixed odds bingo games. So I just want to understand what is being said as presumably the differentiation between a fixed odds bingo game and fixed odds betting terminal.
I think if I define the fixed odds betting terminal, was it a terminal which fell under the category B2, which is no longer legal to operate in this country, which the betting shops could operate 4 of these. As a AGC operator, we have never been able to operate a fixed odds betting terminal, which my statement actually backs up there. It reads, casino gaming limit premises do not operate fixed odds betting terminals in brackets FOBT category B2 gaming machines, and that's what that statement refers to. A fixed odds B2 machine was of £100 stake and a £500 prize. That is what I'm referring to in that statement, and we do not operate that.
And that is different to a fixed odds bingo game?
It is indeed.
Right, just to clarify that point. Thank you, James.
Can I just also assist just a little? I mean, Ms. Tipple is right. The fixed odds betting terminal came into existence because betting operators were trying to get around the strictures on gaming machines, which then applied to betting officers. Essentially, the betting officers were entitled to have 2 low level stake and prize, what were called amusement with prize machines. And they invented these machines, which they called FOBTs, and they said, well, these are not gaming machines, so they're not governed by the stricture. They're betting machines. They're fixed odds betting. And the old gaming board said, well, they look pretty much like gaming machines to us. And that led to a high court action, which all before the Gambling Act, which was resolved on the basis that they would be restricted to 4 per premises with a stake of £100 and a prize of £500. And that was carried forward into the Gambling Act as a B2 gaming machine and governed by the technical standards for B2 gaming machines. After many, many years of debate, during the course of 2018, the Parliament removed the ability for betting officers to use B2 gaming machines with a stake of £100, and they reduced the stake to £2. so as to correlate with the maximum stake for B3 gaming machines in bingo clubs and adult gaming centres. And so it remains. You have B2 machines and B3 machines with the same stake and prize, but different technical standards applying to the B2 machine, previously known as the fixed odds betting terminals. When Mr. Tipple says in his statement, we can't operate fixed odds betting terminals, that's absolutely right. They cannot operate these B2 machines, and they've never been able to.
Can I just say one thing, please?
No,
I'll keep
Mr.
calm.
Grant.
I won't get,
Mr. Grant.
I won't get excited. I won't get
Mr.
excited.
Grant, no, you can't.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'll be in my statement anyway.
Thank you. If we are at the end of those questions, can I ask you once again for a set of blue hands, please?
Everybody's heard, Chairman.
Thank you. Now, I would like to turn to the objectors. I'm going to call Mr. Were first and then Mr. Grant. Before I do that, I would like you to introduce yourselves, please. You have between you 10 minutes.
Well, we only got 5 minutes each.
Mr. Were, are you able to stop at 5 minutes?
I will do my very best. I appreciate that you need to be careful on time, Chair. A lot of the questions that have been asked I would have been dealing with, but I think the committee have got a grasp of it. So I'll just try and steer my issues into what's already been said.
Okay, if you would just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name's Paddy Were. I'm a betting and gaming solicitor, and I'm representing Mr. Woodhead, whose representation is at page 51 of your papers.
And Mr. Grant, when you come on, you are?
Elfie Grant, representing myself.
Thank you. Mr. Were.
Chair, thank you very much. I think Councillor Bridgman very helpfully set out for you at the beginning of these proceedings what the legislation is under paragraph or section 153 of the Act. And that says that your duty is to aim to permit the use of the premises. So it's the use of the premises that you're assessing. And I accept from the outset that your starting point is that you aim to permit. However, when you get objections to an application, be they from responsible authorities or in this case from interested parties, then your discretion is engaged and the duty falls upon you to assess in those circumstances a number of questions, but I'm going to focus very fairly and squarely on the ability to the issue that these premises will have in impact terms on the licensing objectives of crime and disorder. Now, the applicant puts a huge amount of paperwork in front of you, but it doesn't stop there, because if it did, every application would be granted. There is a duty upon you to then look at what, for example, that you've heard from Councillor Vickers, from some local knowledge and from a significant number of local people, including an online petition, which when I last looked at it goes to 176 signatories, but a lot of people raising representations that they don't believe that premises that are going to offer what Casino wish to offer here, sitting next to a kebab shop that potentially could open until 5 o'clock in the morning, the late night sector, but it has the ability to properly promote the licensing objectives. Interested parties have a voice. They're given that under section 158 of the Act. That's replicated in paragraph 1.6 of your policy. And it's important then really to assess when they're saying what they're saying to you against the application that falls to be considered. Now, I want to just touch on the conditions that have been offered at page 43 of the additional bundle, because some of those I failed to see what they actually mean. So if you look at conditions 10 and 12, condition 10, if trading past midnight, the maglock will always be in use. And 12, if trading past midnight, there will always be 2 members of staff on duty. Till when? They are not prescriptive conditions. They don't give you a good understanding of when the maglock or the minimum of 2 members of staff will be operational. These are generic conditions. These are a generic bundle of documents that do not take into account the impact of these premises in its particular location close to the nighttime economy. The applicant calls Mr. Butterworth to give you evidence, and his report is prepared and given to you in the additional documents. This is an application for a 24/7 bingo license, but Mr. Butterworth has only carried out assessments locally until midnight, until 2200 hours on the 29th, 22:30 on the 30th and the 31st. So I would ask you to prefer the evidence and the documents that are put forward from the local people and Councillor Vickers for understanding the local community, what is taking place in the local area, rather than Mr. Butterworth, who has attended at a time through no fault of his own during COVID, when premises are not open to a later hour, and we don't have the potential impact of people outside the kebab shop, people leaving late night venues. So I think it's important, Chair, for you to give due weight to the opposition that's been raised. This application is for the premises to trade for 24/7. It will be a machine-led environment, and you are able, in your discretionary powers, to assess on what you've heard that it would be a situation where, in this particular location, it would be difficult, particularly through the night, to promote the licensing objectives of crime and disorder. And in those circumstances, you have ample opportunity to either refuse the application or certainly look at the hours of opening if you were mindful to grant the license with those conditions, which I say are not prescriptive enough to actually give you detail of how they would be managed through the night. Chair, I'm conscious that Mr. Grant wants to have some time to talk to you as well, but I would ask you to look carefully at what the legislation is. You have a discretion. Doesn't matter how much information is put before you, it's for you to assess, looking forward, what is more likely than not to happen should this licence be granted. And we've heard in questions raised from one of your colleagues, Chair, that we now know that not all of these premises trade 24/7. So some local authorities have thought that it was appropriate not to allow the premises to trade 24/7. Those are the submissions I would wish to make, and I'm sure Mr. Grant will want to continue with his submissions now.
Mr. Grant.
Yes, yeah. Right. Hang on, I'm just getting... As I said, I think the morally you're asking on about firstly, how many bingo tournaments and how many slots will be on the premises, and I feel that Mr. Butterworth, the way he described our town, he would never be able to become a estate agent to sell houses. The way he described our town, he seemed to think that everybody in the town, and as the solicitor said before, he come round at half lockdown, so he don't. And he on about broken windows. If people live in Newbury, they know shop windows get kicked in nearly every weekend by walking down there. And Mr. Butler on about the premises, the other slot machine placed down the other end, that closed at 10 o'clock at night time. So there wouldn't be any problems there. And for a company who say there is never any problems in their premises, they are got a lot of people, we do this, we do that to object to them coming back in their shops. There are people all over the place in all of their shops, and I spoke to the young lady in London, I won't say who it was because I don't want to get the young lady into problems. I spoke to her and I said, what happened if there are problems? She said, we lock ourselves in the loos. The lady said, these people are not social workers. They lock themselves in the loo, and that is quite common. And you find to make out that betting offices is full of crowded people. But that can't be right, because I know what gamblers are like. They are loners. They go in, have their bet, walk out. Most people walk out of a betting office and out of machine places with their head low, because half the time they feel ashamed that they've been in there. And everybody a free agent, and there should be bookmakers. I'm not saying that, but we do not need this premises. And the niche of your market, your customers, the niche of what I can understand reading all Mr. Battleworth statements, are the low paid and people on benefits. They come into town to buy the stuff. They got an odd fiver in their pocket, ain't got a lot, they think, well, I might go in there and make that into £10 or £15. Then they come out, they lost it all. And then the other thing was that the late night people are all entertainment people, bar staff and restaurant staff who come into their premises, as they said, to relax in a comfortable atmosphere. They low-paid workers, and what I know of bar staff, they want to get themselves home. Vulnerable people, please describe a vulnerable person. If somebody have 2 glasses of strong lager, they shouldn't get behind a wheel. So when the people go in, come out of these pubs and clubs and go in, they go say, have you had more than 2 pints of lager? They're vulnerable when they go in these places and play these machines. They not only go wake up in the morning with an hangover and half a kebab down their best shirt, they go realise they're a bit of plastic had a bit of a beating as well. And I have spoken to 17 different police officers in the Newbury area, and they have all been different because I took their lapel numbers, and to a person, to a man, to a woman, none of them want the 24-hour gambling establishment because they say with the problems they have, all they want to do is get the people out, let them have their kebabs or burgers and get them in their taxis or transport home. And they said that off the record. Obviously they can't because they don't want to get themselves into problems. And I'll just say once more, I'm starting because it do upset me a little bit because Newbury is a lovely town. There's no doubt about that. It is a brutal town, Newbury. And I just pray that the council and the committee, that you say no to this licence. And as in the premises,
Grant, you're running out of time.
I know. Just one more thing. The premises calling for crime and that, it isn't go up and round after. It happened 3 or 4 days later when they got home and they ain't got no money. They ain't got the money for their groceries. They ain't got clothes for their children. That's when the problems start. It don't start right. Mr. Battlefield said he was in the market at midday checking, and it must have been a market day because the stores were going up. And he said, I noticed there was no crime. Well, there wouldn't be any crime at 12 o'clock midday, would there? You know, as I said, he went round when it was half virus with the pub shutting early. He haven't got a true response at all of what Newbury can be like. Newbury is one beautiful little provincial town. Got some rough diamonds, but that make character of the town.
We agree with you on that, Mr. Grant, but I'm going to have to stop you there.
And another thing, just one more thing, we have got 4 bingo halls here already. Each of the betting offices, the 2 megabets, Ladbrokes and Coles, all do bingo. They got bingo machines in there. You pay £1 a time or per many numbers for 5p units, and you can play a game every 3 minutes. So we've got 4.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. I have to bring you to a close.
Okay, thank you for your time, sir.
Right.
Thank you.
Blue hands, please. Everybody confirm that they have heard. That a full set?
It is now, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, questions, please.
Councillor Linden has his hand raised, Chairman.
Councillor Linden, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Could I ask Mr. Were, what sort of timings were you suggesting that we should allow this to be open on your explanation?
Councillor Linden, my client asks you to refuse the application, but obviously what has developed during these proceedings is that there is concern from a number of parties in relation to the late night opening, and I think it's been suggested that other premises close of a similar gambling environment close at about 10 o'clock. I think the issues around here, which you will know from the local area and that your 2 ward councillors, is that there are some late night venues, some late night pubs, a nightclub and a kebab shop that has the potential next door to trade until 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's certainly the later time after 10 o'clock would be an example where there are difficulties, I think, anticipated.
Thank you, Jim.
Councillor Bridgman, any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. To Mr. Were again. You rightly, and you accepted that I'd referred to section 153 and our obligations and the thrust of, if I put it to you, the Gambling Act, which is to permit premises unless there is a reason not to, rather than decide whether or not to in that sense. So we have a duty to permit, and we then mitigate that, if you like. So on the question of crime, which I think you accept is the principal area where we might have some involvement, the difficulty I have, and I invite you to give your view, is with evidence. There is a whole raft of paperwork, as you rightly say, the applicant has put in a substantial bundle, which includes a substantial risk assessment. And there is reference to the amount of recorded crime in the area. And I have some sympathy for the argument on behalf of the applicant that if there were perceived issues with crime, one would expect to see the police as an authority responding to this application in negative terms, but they haven't. So I just question you how you say to this committee we should be applying that test in your favour rather than the applicants, or your client's favour rather than the applicants, to say that there is an issue with crime and disorder and we should therefore refuse the application.
That's a very, very strong questions and quite right. The legislation, as you rightly say, is a permissive piece of legislation. So section 153 says that you should aim to permit, but it gives under section 158 of the Act, interested parties who feel that there could be, so residents or businesses that could be affected by the grant of such a licence, the opportunity to be heard. So it's not unusual in cases such as these for either AGC applications or for bingo applications for the responsible authorities not to raise opposition to an application, but for residents or businesses in the area who see what happens on a regular basis to raise opposition on the basis that they are fearful of what the future would hold in relation to crime and disorder as a result of premises being given their license. It's always very difficult to look to evidence something moving forward, which is why you as a licensing subcommittee who will be experienced under both the Licensing Act and the Gambling Act understand that it's a qualitative assessment looking to what is more likely than not to happen, should the license be granted or not. And in a case where you've got a lot of people saying to you, there are issues around here, Mr. Grant has just told you that windows are put through in the town centre late at night. You've got the benefit of Councillor Vickers and Councillor Moore here, who are obviously the town centre ward councillors. And it is always very difficult to second guess what's going to happen. But you have a discretion. If you didn't have a discretion, this would be a pointless exercise. It would be rubber stamping, grant the licence, and then review if anything goes wrong. And that's not the way the legislation is drafted. It doesn't create an easy discussion for you because it's something that you've got to weigh the merits of everything that you've been said, but it's still a discretion. If there weren't a discretion, the legislation would be obviously drafted differently. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If we have no more members' questions, I have none for the objectors. Please, could we have another set of, hopefully, blue hands? Could everybody confirm?
Yes.
Moira?
All fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, it's for the applicant and then ward member
Chairman, point of order. Doesn't the applicant? I don't know if the applicant had any questions for the objectors, but I didn't. Maybe I missed.
I was
you
just
asking.
about to offer the applicant the opportunity to, as both the applicant and the ward member, I was putting them in that order. Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Applicant, I'll come to you, Mr. Colvin. Do you have any questions for the objectors?
Thank you, sir, for your courteous offer, which I equally courteously decline.
Thank you. Ward member.
No, I don't have any questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine. In that case, it's the ward member's turn.
Okay, thank you. Right, I certainly don't have a lot to say. I don't think I'll be taking up your full 10 minutes. There's been a lot of information at this meeting, and I'm very impressed, as I've said already, by the organisation itself and how it's set up. It's obviously extremely experienced and has sent us an enormous amount of information about how it functions and how it tries to do its best to serve its clients and look out for vulnerability, etc. So that in itself is impressive. I take on board the concerns that the objectors have raised. And obviously this is a very emotive issue, because anything that involves behaviours that can become troublesome and addictive causes emotion and causes concern, and that's quite right. And there's always a concern about whether we have enough services and support out there for individuals that have problems with these addictive behaviours. That is an issue on its own. And one can also refer to issues around drinking, alcohol. I mean, that can be abused. And yet drinking and socialising and drink is normally, when we're not in a COVID situation, one of our most popular pastimes, you could say, but it creates a lot of problems with a lot of individuals and households. But these are issues outside what the local authority can deal with. So much as I take on board all the concerns of the objectors, most of them are around personal concerns about the morality of gambling. And I think those issues, which has probably been said by the applicant, need to be taken up at a national level. And maybe this is something that those that feel strongly about it need to do. Do we need more restrictions? Do we need more services? Do we need more education? Maybe more education in schools for young people about the problems with gambling and how easy it can become addictive. So I think these are national issues, and I hope those that feel strongly and have objected. And we've heard, I think I'm particularly impressed by Mr. Grant, who has expressed himself very eloquently on this issue. And despite the technology, which he's found quite difficult, has made the effort to attend this meeting. And I assume he's not very used to attending, apart from only having his phone and not being able to see what's going on. I don't think he's used to attending meetings such as this, council meetings, which can be quite threatening and difficult. So I have a lot of admiration for Mr. Grant for coming forward and expressing his views and expressing them very clearly and not being over emotional, although it's something he feels very strongly about. So thank you very much, Mr. Grant. And I certainly appreciate and have listened to what you've said. But as we said, this is the issues you are mainly concerned about need to be dealt with at a national level, and hopefully he will progress that and maybe go and talk to our MP about his concerns. So what I'd really like to say, and what I'd ask the committee to consider, is whether we could look at the hours of operation here. Now, I know the client has, and it's not in this bundle of papers, I think it's in the planning bundle, and I find this difficult whether we can cross-reference between the two. But I know that they at one stage did offer to reduce their hours of opening, that they weren't pushing for 24 hours, that they offered to actually consider lesser hours of opening. Whether that was in appreciation of the fact that this is a residential area, the marketplace has many flats in this area. In particular, it has a flat above the premises that we're talking about. So I've heard it said that we can't consider nuisance here. Maybe that's a planning matter, but there must be some noise and disturbance. for the people above this shop. And 24 hours every day, it's not just 24 hours on some days, it's 24 hours, 7 days of the week that this could be operating, which for people working, for people with children, I think is a big disturbance. So we have talked about reference to the other premises in the marketplace, the pubs and the club and the kebab shop, that they are open, can be at the very latest 5 a.m. But I don't think that's probably 5 a.m. every day. I mean, the bulk of the trade of these, the pubs and clubs, is at the weekend. So I think if we look at the details in the documents, that it's the weekend when these establishments are open later. So that's 24 hours every day, 7 days a week, is quite different than just having an establishment open a little bit late at the weekend. So please, I'd ask the committee to consider looking at the hours of opening, and for the clients themselves to consider. They've also said that possibly they might not need this 24-hour opening 7 days a week. There might not be a demand. And I think personally, and my colleague will agree with this, there probably isn't a demand for this 7 days a week. You're paying your staff. And I don't think you actually answered my question about whether there should be 2 members of staff on all the time. I'm assuming there probably won't, particularly on the hours in the early morning when you might get the problem gamblers coming. But you need 2 members of staff on, I think, all of the time. And that's quite an expense for this establishment when there might be quite few customers. So that is my main concern, is that you please look at the hours of opening. I continue to be concerned about the safety of the staff in this case, if there are problems. I don't think I'm particularly reassured by what I heard about the training, so that would be an issue myself about the safety of the staff, but that is for the applicant themselves to be considering as they look at at their business as a whole. But thank you very much for the presentations, and again I'd reiterate, please consider reducing these hours of opening, not to 24 hours, but to the hours that we have that are in line with the other establishments in the marketplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Please, could everybody confirm that they have heard that presentation?
Yes.
All set?
I'm just waiting to hear from Andy Tipple.
I think I saw Mr. Tipple drop out at one point and come back in.
Yeah, I can confirm that Mr. Tipple can actually hear, but he can't raise his hand or come on the video for some reason.
Is he happy?
Yes.
That we should continue?
Yes, he is.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Which case, members, any questions? No? That's fine. In which case, does the applicant have any questions?
No, thank you, sir.
Do the objectors have any questions?
One question, if I may. Mr. Grant. To do this premises out, I believe it come up to need 200,000 or 250,000 pounds.
Question for Councillor Vickers.
This is Mr. Grant. Am I speaking out of turn again?
If you're putting a question to Councillor Vickers, you are not.
Well, I will put a question. If that allows me to have a question.
To Councillor Vickers.
Can I put right? The premises, to have this premises done, will cost between 200,000 and 260,000, I believe. And their premise for their business outlay is that they like to get their money back within a year or 18 months. Well, I worked it out with staff, business rates, rent for the premises and electric bill and all the services there. They would have to turn over, to start with, over £10,000 a week. Well, to me, for them to turn over £10,000 a week is an awful lot of money out of the pockets of the people of Newbury. That is my question. Where they could be spending it at another shop. And another point, I have got their brochure.
Mr. Grant.
Yes, just one more. One second. One second.
No, Mr. Grant. You've asked a question or attempted to. We'll see if Councillor Vickers can answer it. If she can't, we'll give Mr. Colvin the opportunity in a moment to comment on it, as he will be next on.
I think Mr. Grant, again, is expressing a concern rather than a question, I think. I don't think I can answer what he said. He's obviously looked into this and has some information that I don't have. But yes, I support our high street, and I would like to see our high street being supported by the people of Newbury, if that answers his question. But I can't really comment on what he's just said, I don't think.
Fair enough. If we have no other comments at this stage, I guess we better have another set of blue hands, and then I will turn to Mr. Colvin for addressing any comments made at this meeting. Do we have a set?
Chairman, we need Mr. Word to put his hand up, please. And also Mr. Grant is muted, so he will need to unmute himself. I think he needs to push hash and then 6 on his phone to do that.
Mr. Grant? Mr. Grant, can you confirm that you heard everything? We are a little stuck if Mr. Grant is unable to reply. What do we do at this point?
Stephen, would it be helpful if Mr. Grant dialed back in again?
I think perhaps it might.
That may be the best route. I can see he's still there, but obviously there's a problem with the muting. So that maybe if Mr. Grant can hear us, that he does temporarily depart and return to us.
Do you need Mr. Grant to hear the last part of this? Is it possible, Mr. Grant, if you are able to hear us, are you able to dial back in again? He's not reacting. Ah, that looks promising. He's left the meeting. Hopefully he will be returning shortly. Mr. Grant, you're back again, but you are currently muted. Are you able to unmute yourself? Maura, you were saying it was #6, did you say?
I think it's you have to push hash and then 6 on your phone, Chairman.
And we can't do anything to unmute him?
I'm afraid not, Chairman.
Perhaps one option is for Mr. Grant to leave the meeting and then an officer phone him to check that he has heard that part of the meeting.
Okay, but he will still need to come back in again, and
That's
we can
right.
that process.
Yeah.
Mr. Grant, did you hear that? If you did, please leave the meeting again, and one of our officers will phone you to get the confirmation. And then you can come back into the meeting to hear the last part of it. Mr. Grant, are you able to leave the meeting? So if you can leave the meeting, Moira Fraser will phone you. Moira or Stephen Child will phone you and ask you to confirm that you heard the last part. But until you do that, we are a little stuck.
Chairman, I am trying to call, but he's busy on his line is engaged.
Could a text message be sent to Mr. Grant?
Not on a landline.
No, that's true. Sorry.
And he has no mobile.
Have we got an address? Can somebody get in a bike and go round there?
My understanding is that he does have a mobile and we have that information.
Oh, yes, the mobile is in the pack, actually.
Yeah, please don't read that out.
Of his,
Please, Councillor Vickers, can you please not read that mobile number out, please?
Read the mobile number.
No, please don't read the mobile out. As far as I understand, an officer of the council has got Mr. Grant's mobile number, and therefore you could try that number to seek confirmation that he's heard.
I'm sure Moira will be doing that now.
Thank you, Chairman.
That's Mr. Grant's mobile number, I suspect, coming in now.
Yeah, it looks as though that mobile has tried to join, which I assume is Mr. Oh.
Gone again?
Yes, gone again.
I'm sorry to everybody present, but the wonders of technology we have to deal with. Me with my wavy screen, which our IT department has not been able to find a solution to. Thought I might use my own machine this morning, and that went wavy this morning as well.
I mean, I can confirm I've just spoken to Mr. Grant. His landline has just, the battery on his phone's died. He's trying to ring back in now on his mobile, but he has confirmed that he has heard everything that has been said up until now.
Okay, that's good. But we do then need him for the next stage.
We do, and he's trying to dial in now using his mobile phone. So Stephen and I will just take a look up for that number to come up. Chairman, could I suggest that we have a 5-minute recess or whatever time the members of the panel feel appropriate before the summing up and wait for Alfie to come back in?
5-minute recess, everybody. Makes sense to me. It looks as if we're able to come back to life. Can I ask everybody to come back on screen? And we are still short on numbers, however. So we're clearly short of Mr. Grant again.
Chairman, he was with us. He seems to have left again. I'll phone him again to see what's happened. Apologies.
Right, I think we are only short of Mr. Grant.
Chairman, he's dialing then again. What happens when he's coming into the meeting, he's on mute. I have explained that he won't be able to address the committee anymore, so it would be fine just to listen, but as long as we can ascertain that he can hear.
Which you can do via telephone call.
That's correct.
Then we'll operate that way. As soon as he comes in. No sign of him, Moira.
Not at the moment, Chairman. I'm trying to ring on both his numbers.
Chairman, on a point of order, and I'll be looking to Beth to chuck her 2 penneth in on this. Given that I was substantially involved in the motions to council that have resulted in the rules that we've set for remote hearings, and in particular, the need in a licensing subcommittee hearing to ensure that those who are present can hear and be heard, because of the, in my view, poor drafting of the regulations around local authorities holding remote meetings like this. Can I make this suggestion? Mr. Grant's contribution in that sense, I think, has come to an end. He has had his opportunity to speak. He's had his opportunity to ask questions. There is no further opportunity to ask questions unless I am advised by officers differently. Basically, we are now here to hear Mr. Colvin's summing up on behalf of the applicant, and that will be I believe that will be an end to the meeting. There won't be an opportunity for further questioning. This meeting is both being broadcast on YouTube and is being recorded, so it can be looked at again subsequently. So Mr. Grant will be able to see what happened, or it's either see what is happening live by watching YouTube, or see what happened if he comes to it later in the day or later in the week. So I'm looking to Beth as to whether or not we think there is a risk, because that is what we're talking about. That's the reason we've got these rules. It's the risk to decision making. If there is actually a risk to continuing the meeting without Mr. Grant being online, as it were.
I think there's got to be a risk because the principle of the regulations is to hear and be heard, and he can't hear. There's also provision within the Constitution for you to kind of change the procedure if you so wish. So I appreciate that that's how we've set out, that that's the final part of the meeting, but there's always an option for you to suspend that and to set out a different procedure. So my view is that it is a risk, and he should be able to hear and be heard, and it would be for him to say that, you know, if that's not a problem, then we can continue. So I think we need to speak to Mr. Grant.
It would be appropriate to try one more time to speak to Mr. Grant, but I think Councillor Bridgman is correct in one point, because there is no further opportunity for Mr. Grant to be heard.
I would concur on that.
It's a matter for you, Chair, but clearly he can't hear if he's not joined the meeting.
Moira, any further news?
I've spoken to him again, Chairman. He is trying to dial in on his mobile now.
Well, we give him another minute. But I think after that, we must complete the meeting. would you like to give him another ring and suggest that he perhaps look at the last of it on YouTube?
Yeah, my information says to me there's one phone call in the listener. I can't see him, but that would indicate to me that he's listening in. I don't know if Moira can able to confirm that with him.
That is Mr. Grant.
He's listening in. Okay, in that case, let's continue. It's for Mr. Colvin then. I can see Mr. Grant's just come in as well. Mr. Colvin, it's your turn again.
Thank you, sir. I'll try not to keep you from your lunch for too long. I'm going to talk a little bit about the statute, because there's been some discussion back and forward about the nature of the discretion and so forth. And then I'm going to talk about the principle of the licence, and then I'm going to talk about the conditions, and that'll be the order of my address in reply to what's been said. So first of all, what this statute's about, and the nature of the discretion and the role of the parties and so forth. And you can get all you need by looking in our big bundle at page 78, using the handwritten numbers on the right. And just to a point made by Councillor Vickers, this was all a very deliberative process by Parliament. It was sitting in and around Parliament for about 3 years. But is going to be reviewed at the beginning of next year. There's going to be a national review of these of gambling, and everyone will get to have their say. But in the meantime, this is what we've got, and this is the Gambling Commission's guidance, which we've all got to take into account and live by. And as it says, as explained earlier, the licensing authority's primary obligation under section 153 is to permit, insofar as it thinks that to do so is A, in accordance with the codes, B, in accordance with the guidance, C, reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives subject to A and B, and D, in accordance with the policy subject to A to C. So just a word or two of commentary about that. The actual word in the statute is shall aim, as Councillor Bridgman read out at the very beginning. The Gambling Commission's interpretation of that is your primary obligation. When Parliament uses the word shall, it means it's mandatory. So some people think it shouldn't be, and there should be a wider discretion, but it's mandatory. And the way Parliament has done this is to say you should grant these licenses, provided that the application is compliant with what is in A to D. And in this case, it is compliant with A to D. There's been no evidence or suggestion that it breaches a code of practice. There's no evidence or suggestion that it breaches any of the Commission's guidance. The application has only got to be reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives. Why is that? Well, because the safest way of making sure that nothing ever happens on a premises is to keep them closed. So there's always some risk to the licensing objectives if you allow premises to open. But quite clearly, the application is reasonably consistent with the licensing objectives. And if it weren't, then C is subject to A and B. In other words, there's a hierarchy. And D, in accordance with the statement of licensing policy, and there's no evidence or suggestion of any breach in that regard either. Well, what happened to discretion then? That was Mr. Wer's point to you. Parliament set up this system where people can make objections. Have you got to ignore them or what? And that's answered for you by the facing page, page 77, where you're told that moral or ethical objections to gambling are not valid. Parliament has decided that gambling is a legitimate, effectively retail activity, which carries risk along with, if I just pick at random, the consumption of alcohol and the consumption of fatty foods. But Parliament has decided there should be an aim to permit nonetheless, provided that the applicant is compliant with the rules. These debates about whether it's a good or a bad thing don't figure in these hearings. And in order to reject an application, it says a licensing authority should rely on reasons that demonstrate that the licensing objectives are not being or unlikely to be met. And when the Gambling Commission says that, it's correct. You need reasons which demonstrate. And how do you demonstrate in these hearings? You demonstrate with evidence. And that was what I had very much in mind when I tried to address the main objection head on, which was that the premises would suffer from crime and disorder. And I made 8 points. I gave 8 reasons, evidential reasons, why you could be confident, or at least find, that the premises would not breach that licensing objective. And that licensing objective, and I'm not going to repeat those 8 reasons. I think I've repeated some of them anyway, because of the technological fallout. And what I would say is that, having heard all of the objectors speak, nobody has really answered the 8 points which I made, and I would simply ask you to accept those points. So in answer to Mr. Were, of course, people can come along and make their points, but there's a great difference between making your points and having your points accepted. And if, for example, the police had come along and said, look, we've got experience of this sort of thing, that it really is creating problems, or if I had been telling you porky pies, I suppose, in saying in my client's other 170 locations, they don't experience these crime and disorder problems. If that had been gainsaid by anyone, then perhaps you would be able to say, well, we make a finding that it's likely there will be crime and disorder, and therefore we're going to refuse. But there's been no such evidence whatsoever. And Mr. Were, when he was criticising Mr. Butterworth's statement, Mr. Butterworth did what he could in the COVID era to report to you honestly and completely. But one of his paragraphs wasn't challenged by anybody and says this: in my experience of hearings in other areas, no evidence has ever been produced to show that a machine-type premises, as proposed in Newbury, currently operating in an area, creates the crime and disorder that those making representations fear. And Mr. Butterworth has been a leading police officer in very deprived parts of Greater Manchester, knows how these places operate, and is able to say to you that they just don't give rise to these sorts of problems. It's a different demographic, it's an older demographic, it's low numbers, the sort of problems you sometimes get outside pubs and clubs, you don't get outside these sorts of premises. And so, in answer to the objectors' points, of course, you have to make a judgment, but it's got to be a judgment based on evidence, and you've really heard no evidence at all. So far as conditions are concerned, well, that's dealt with just in that same bundle, but page 79. And there's a paragraph, or three or four paragraphs, which have got a square around them. And you're reminded by the Commission that you have to aim to permit, and you shouldn't attach conditions except where it's necessary, which is a high bar, in accordance with the licensing objectives, the codes of practice and the guidance and the policy. And of course, you shouldn't turn down applications where the objection can be dealt with through the use of conditions. And then 9.31, conditions have to be proportionate. And so they've got to be relevant to the need to make the building suitable. They've got to be fair, reasonable in all other respects. And so to take one example, this idea of whether the hours should be limited, I would say this, that if you don't have evidence that these premises are going to create crime and disorder, and they haven't created crime and disorder elsewhere, and the police are not coming to you and saying there's going to be crime and disorder, and you haven't got evidence that Newbury is a hotbed of crime and disorder at night, and so on and so forth, you don't really, with respect, have the basis to chop away at my client's hours. And certainly Mr. Were's suggestion that they should be chopped till 10 p.m. is, with the greatest respect, not something which is tenable or carries any weight at all. You've got a nightclub with large numbers of people coming out together at 3 o'clock in the morning, having consumed alcohol and dancing. You've got a kebab shop, which at weekends is trading until 5 a.m., accommodating some of the people who've come out of the nightclub. The idea that you're going to stop people in their 40s from wandering in, playing a machine or two and wandering out again at 10 p.m. Is with the greatest respect, without the shred of credibility. But where would this be considered? Well, there are at least two different forums for its consideration. The first is the planning forum, which has still to pronounce, and that is entitled to take account of residential amenity and nuisance. Whereas, as Parliament has said and the Gambling Commission has said, that's not a matter for this committee at all, but it is a matter for planning. Councillor Vickers raised the planning application. It shouldn't be mentioned at all, but it's fair to say that environmental health hasn't seen fit to make any point about even amenity, but there's certainly no point to be made about crime and disorder. But if the planning authority imposes a condition, then that will bind my client, subject to any appeals, of course. But even if planning doesn't do that, if my client operates and it's discovered that there is a nuisance to local residents, that it hasn't turned out, as I've assured you that it will turn out, it's turned out differently from how it's turned out everywhere else in the country, and I suppose that may happen. It's not literally inconceivable. It's not literally inconceivable that the sun will fail to rise tomorrow. But if it were to happen that there is nuisance, then there's a perfectly good system under the Environmental Protection Act, the abatement notice system, where my client can be directed to abate the nuisance, including by earlier closing. But this issue about nuisance, which was raised by Councillor Vickers, there were residents living nearby and so forth, Parliament, see pages 80 and 81, specifically discounted this in the context of the Gambling Act. It's not a relevant matter for you. It wouldn't be legal for you to operate on that basis. And so it's something which simply shouldn't be brought into account. So far as other matters were concerned, Mr. Were decided to take issue with the wording, just the wording of a couple of conditions. The way this is normally done between lawyers is that letters are exchanged and wording can be worked out between very experienced licensing lawyers. It's quite odd for it to come out impromptu, without any warning at all, in a licensing hearing. But he asked if the maglock is always in use past midnight, until what time? And he also asked if trading past midnight, when my client said there'll always be 2 members of staff on duty, again, until what time? And my client would suggest that the time is the time when night gives way to day, which we would suggest is 5 a.m., which happens to correlate with the end of the hours for late night refreshment under the Licensing Act. So there'll always be 2 members of staff on duty between midnight and 5 a.m. and the maglock will always be on between midnight and 5 a.m. And then the other condition which was referred to was by Councillor Vickers. Again, this was impromptu, and so I haven't had time during a virtual hearing to take full instructions on this, but she wanted 2 members of staff on at all times of day. Well, that would, in almost all cases, render the premises unviable. There'll be 2 members of staff chaperoning 1 customer in many times of the day, particularly, for example, during the mornings. Every single premises, gambling premises in Newbury, I can guarantee you, and West Berkshire and the Thames Valley will have single staffing at all sorts of different times of day. The way this actually happens is that the premises management, and Amanda Kiernan would certainly have said this if she'd been asked, will have a sort of data-driven roster of customer demand for the premises at different times of day. They will also assess what the local risks are, both by talking to staff and in concert with local agencies. And then they will develop a staffing roster which does two things. One, make sure that the staff are safe, because my client has a duty to keep its own staff safe. And two, ensures that my client can comply with its compliance responsibilities. And what is being offered in this case, and there's no evidence that this is the wrong thing to have done, no one's taken issue with it in any evidential sense, is that after 8 p.m, there'll be no pre-planned single staffing. So my client's rosters will always say 2 members of staff. But if a member of staff were then, for example, to fall ill, then my client wouldn't be compelled instantly to close, but then they would try to redeploy staff from other units. But after midnight, there will always be 2 members of staff on duty. So if one member of staff drops off for whatever reason at all, they've got a headache, they have an emergency at home and have to go home, then my client has to shut the doors. That's a fairly typical condition for my client around the country when there are conditions of this sort, and there are conditions of this sort in very, very few cases. So again, I don't mean to be too didactic about it, but there's no evidence to suggest that my client can't be trusted to get this right. However, on all of these points, if my client has got this wrong and there is crime and disorder, or the staffing is not sufficient, or the maglock is going on too late, or is coming off too early, that will become apparent both to my client and to local agencies. And what will actually happen is that my client will make operational adjustments, because you always make operational adjustments when you open premises and have got experience of trading them of one sort or another. And if there are issues which for some reason my client is obdurate and won't cooperate with anybody in dealing with the issues, then it's always open to residents, councillors or local agencies to bring a review application. The fact that this has never happened ever, I hope, gives you all the confidence you need that you have in front of you a highly reputable and responsible and competent operator, which will be a good neighbour and will get this right for Newbury and in compliance with the law. So thank you very much indeed. That's all I wish to say.
Thank you, Mr. Colvin. Under normal circumstances, I would simply ask everybody to confirm that they have heard. However, I know that Councillor Linden did not hear all. So where we have no questions to be asked at this point, Councillor Linden, is there a bit that you want repeated?
Yeah, you were mentioning from Councillor Vickers after the maglock. I think I lost you for about 30 seconds. Do you want to repeat it? If you don't want to, then, you know, I've got the gist of what you said anyway.
You're muted. Mr. Colvin, you're muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say it wasn't an opera. I can't just go back to the score and replay the notes. But I think what I was trying to say was that my client would have the maglock on from 12 o'clock till 5 o'clock. But if it turned out that there needs to be some flex in that, for whatever reason, then my client would always be, it would take it upon itself to flex those times if it needed to. And maybe I said something else, but I'm hoping there's a note of it somewhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. So otherwise, are we all happy that we have heard everything? Better have some blue hands. Is that a full set? And could Mr. Grant confirm that he has heard?
We'll have difficulty with that because he's on his mobile phone now, so I'm unable to text him. So if he could hang up, I can ring him back, because you're about to close the meeting after this, aren't you?
I am going to close the meeting. So I'll say thank you to Mr. Grant. He's gone. Any luck, Maura?
Chairman, I can confirm that Mr. Grant has heard that last bit of the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, all of you, for your contributions. Members of the subcommittee are now going to have to meet separately to consider what's been said, and the written submissions as well. There will be a written decision notice issued to all interested parties setting out the verdict as soon as possible. In any event, within 5 working days of this hearing. Thank you, everybody.